Hello everybody. I am Marnie Smith. I'm the Assistant Director of Career Services at Baruch College in the Marks School. And with me is my colleague, Suzanne Grossman, who is the Director of Career Services at Marks. And this is the John D. Solomon information session for their fellowship. And we are so glad to have you with us today. We have with us Amanda Kravchik, and also we've got a bunch of Solomon alums who are also Marks students and alums, and we'll be able to hear from them about their experiences. But to kick it off, I'm really going to hand it over to Amanda, and I'll let everybody introduce themselves. And yeah, she's going to tell us a bit about the fellowship, and we'll do a Q&A after that. So thanks for being here, Amanda.
No problem. Thanks so much for having me. Hi, everyone. Amanda Kravchik, Deputy Director of Strategic Partnerships at New York City Emergency Management, which is also the unit that oversees the John D. Solomon Fellowship for Public Service. And Erica Amaya is also here, my colleague specifically from the Strategic Partnerships unit, and she also helps to oversee the program. So thanks everyone so much for joining. I want to tell you a little bit about the program, of course, and then any questions, please feel free to jump in or add them in the chat if that's possible. So the John D. Solomon Fellowship is the first program, or excuse me, the first fellowship specifically dedicated to public service and emergency management in New York City. So we have 10 fellows across various city agencies, and they are placed from September through May and assigned to various projects, tasks, and I'm sure everyone, especially our alums, will tell you how things may change, especially in light of COVID, right? The tasks and the projects that you may start with may be a little bit different as priorities change or there are emergencies, impacts to the city. So with that, we expect all of the fellows to be a little bit flexible in terms of their projects and responsibilities. But all of the applicants must be in graduate school throughout their entire placement. So if you are currently in undergrad, but will be graduating this year and entering graduate school in September, you're more than welcome to apply. And if you will be if you're currently in graduate school and will continue through May of 2022, yes, May 2022, then you again are more than welcome to apply. What we're really looking for in terms of applicants is flexibility and a commitment to public service, right? So what does that mean, and how do you show that in an application? So take a look at the questions, of course, but we're really looking for folks to give us examples. And I know that a lot of folks say, hey, I don't necessarily have a lot of experience. This would be my first potential office job, and that's okay. But if you have any volunteer experience, if you have any articles that you've read through or looked up, or if you've had any interesting conversations, then share that. Not everyone has had access to various opportunities, and we're very, very cognizant of that. But we do want to make sure that you are committed to public service, or at least have an understanding of what that means. And if you're not sure, you're more than welcome, obviously, in this forum to ask us any questions, but also send us an email. We're happy to have those conversations. And of course, speak with Marnie and Suzanne. They can kind of walk you through that process as well. We've had several Baruch students who have also been fellows. Obviously, they're here today, and they can tell you a little bit more about their experience. But Erica, did I miss anything? Is there anything else that I should have touched on?
No, I also just want to add that although public service is the focus of the fellowship, emergency management is a really big part of what we do and what our fellows get to experience. And we really encourage folks who may not have a background in emergency management, but have an interest in urban planning or sustainability and resilience, because I really think, and we really think, that these issues are really interconnected. So if you think that you might have an interest in emergency management, we really encourage you to apply. Many of our fellows have gone on to, they didn't know much before they were a fellow and kind of fell in love with the field and have chosen to stay in it, while others have gone into the private sector. But the fellowship alumni network is just so broad, a really fantastic mix of people who are currently serving or have served. in public service. So just a little shout out to emergency management. I feel like everyone must know what an emergency manager does right now, but that wasn't always the case. So I definitely encourage you, if you do have questions, to reach out to us. Definitely take advantage of the opportunity to ask our current and our current fellows and alumni any questions you might have about their experience as well.
Great, thanks, ladies. And can you also talk about how this really is doable for folks who are for folks who are handling multiple responsibilities? I guess like it's part-time, it is paid. Can you remind us how much it's paid and also like how many spots there are?
Sure. So it is a, excuse me, it is a paid fellowship. So you get $2,000 stipend in the fall, $2,000 in the spring. And we also understand that all of our fellows are in graduate school. And in addition to graduate school, you may have other priorities, whether that's family, professional, what have you. And so with that, the time that we expect fellows to dedicate is about 15 to 20 hours per week, which is about 2 days. Of course, the more you put into it, meaning the more days you put in, the more you're going to get out, the more responsibilities you'll have, the more projects you'll be able to oversee or complete during that time. But with that said, that really gives you the opportunity to sort of spread your wings and get to meet different folks, whether it's within your specific agency or other agencies. So there are 10, there are 10 spots overall. And right now there are 7 agencies that folks are placed with. And I don't want to pretend that I remember the name, so I'm just going to look at the website really quickly. So it's Emergency Management, Department of Environmental Protection, Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, American Red Cross, Fire Department, Police Department, and the Department of Education. So, and the Department of Social Services. So with that said, those are agencies where not only are you placed with a emergency management and obviously day to day have that experience, but we like to have events, of course, given COVID, they're all virtual, but we like to provide a setting in which you can connect and network with other fellows, as well as with the supervisors of those other placements. And so one thing that I do advise all current fellows to do, and some take advantage of that and others do not, but what I always recommend to current fellows is to reach out to the supervisors at other placements. So for example, if you are placed at the Department of Education, but you really want to know more about the Department of Environmental Protection, you're interested in urban planning, you want a better understanding of what they do, you have that access, you have their contact information. So you can have a virtual coffee, or one day when COVID is over, you can get together and have coffee in person, but you have that access. I mean, I think that that's really important. I think that the biggest thing about this program, about the fellowship overall, is that it provides access to folks who may not have had that access before, to ask those questions, to figure out what their path is, and to also figure out what it is that they like and do not like. It's totally okay to have a conversation with someone, learn about what they do, learn about what their agency does, and then say, that's really great, but that's not for me. Like that's appropriate, and that's also what this program is about.
Excellent. And can you tell us a little bit about the application process?
Sure. So applications, we're currently taking applications, so please take a look. But at the same time, you fill out some of those questions. It's general, name, address, etc. And then what does public service mean to you? And really think through that a little bit. And it's totally okay to start it and come back. So take a look at the portal, and if you're like, hey, I'm not really sure, I don't have the time to really think through this as much as I'd like right now, come back to it. You don't have to fill it out all in one sitting. I mean, quite honestly, sometimes we can tell the difference between someone who sort of rushed through the application versus someone who really took their time and put some thought into their answers. But you fill out the application, and then from there, we select the top 20 to 25 finalists. And then, of course, there's an interview process. So Erica and myself within the Strategic Partnerships unit, because we oversee the entire program, we interview all 20 to 25 finalists. But each supervisor will interview about 10 folks. And that is also a matter of who you're interested in. So let me backtrack for 1 second. We pick the top 20 to 25 finalists, and then we have a webinar where each placement discusses the projects that the fellow will be working on, what their unit or their agency does overall. So you have an understanding of, oh, that's really interesting, or oh, that doesn't fit my skill set, or I'm really, really not interested in that, and that's totally okay. And you send that over to us, right? So your top 5 or so, and the agency will also send their top 5 and take a look at your resumes and your applications. And from there, we start matching folks. You have your interviews, and then we select the top 10, the top fellows that'll be placed in the various agencies for the September 2021 class.
Okay, excellent. Because we also have some of our Solomon alums or current Solomon fellows here, Erica started talking about emergency management, and, I think it's become a lot, like there's been more light shed on it and what emergency management is. I think we would love to hear from current or past fellows. Tell us more about what you actually do, like which agency you're with, and what do you do on a day-to-day basis, or what did you do? So that could be Gina, Anastasia, Pascal.
Yeah, I could jump in,
Great,
Marnie, if that's good. Yeah, everybody can hear me. Hi, everyone. So I'm Gina, and I feel super lucky to have been accepted to the fellowship. I'm currently at the Department of Education's Office of Emergency Management. And I really came from more of a nonprofit background. While at Marks, I definitely, the wheels were kind of spinning. I was kind of thinking it would be interesting to kind of pivot into a government role. And this fellowship has really given me, a great opportunity to kind of get my feet wet. I have been doing all kinds of things. I feel like I come in twice a week, and the day-to-day, can change on a dime with emergency management, which is awesome. It's really exciting, especially during these times. You really feel like you're kind of a fly on the wall for some big changes that are probably going to be permanent to urban planning and the city going forward. So some of the things I've been working on specifically have been accessibility planning and organizing. So all of the public schools across the city are designated as shelter sites. And, pre-COVID, the big focus was usually on like hurricanes and inclement weather. But with COVID, we have really started to focus on vaccination distribution sites. So I've had the opportunity to go on tours of a lot of schools, trying to figure out, would this be a good vaccination site? How can we, plan the logistics for like the amount of people that need to be vaccinated coming into this specific site? Is it handicap accessible? Is it, is the gym on the 5th floor and there's only stairs? Oh, that's not going to work. So doing a lot of that, which has been really interesting. And I've met a lot of people in the Department of Health as well. So I have kind of more of a public health, child welfare background. So it's been really interesting to be out and about and to be mentored by the director of the Office of Emergency Management here, who, you certainly learn that the government agencies are always talking to each other, always, bouncing ideas off of each other. So the networking and amount of people I've met from other agencies is, had really surprised me. I kind of thought, oh, maybe I'll be in like the Department of Education bubble, but that really hasn't been the case. I've met tons of people throughout the city. Otherwise, I'm trying to think other things I've been working on, kind of like continuing operations planning for, how the COVID-19 landscape is really changing, how DOE employees function and work. Like if things are going to be remote going forward, how are we going to make that more smooth? So that's kind of just a short summary of what I've been up to.
Awesome. Thanks, Gina. Does anyone else want to talk about their experience?
I do. Okay. I'm Pascal. I or I was a fellow maybe at least 2 cycles ago. And so I was a fellow for the FDNY. I was fortunate because this placement was really the combination of all the things I was interested in, being communications and emergency management. I was probably the last fellow. I was the last fellow who got a full experience there, not interrupted by COVID and whatnot. Honestly, professionally, it was just a really amazing experience. I had a really strong mentor. And I really just loved the people that I worked with. As a fellow, I got to work on, so in the fire department, we have an internal communications platform, training and information platform called Diamond Plate. And so that's a lot of videos, different pages that go up every week to just update people on new bulletins, EMS, on new protocols, and kind of remind members of what's important. And so like that was the basis of like a lot of what I did there, but I also get different experiences. So being that I was in the multimedia department, I also got to sit in on shoots with any videos that were going on that I was available to sit in on, any planning meetings, any meetings with chiefs about like forward thinking moves on how we were going to alert people about this new thing. I also, so I sat in on video shoots, got to see the production process on that. I'd also help out, we have a podcast. So I was able to sit in on tapings for that and like help with outlines, any of that pre-production. So videos, outlines. As a fellow, typically with the fire department, historically before, you know, COVID happened, the fellow always worked on a book. So I was able to put a book to my name. It was actually quite operationally heavy. So I got a quick trial by fire on that. So like with the fire department, I did get a lot of different experiences with them. I did well there and they hired me on. And recently I just got a promotion. And so I really loved the experience professionally. It was a really strong basis for understanding and being able to kind of move forward in kind of working here and building relationships. It was definitely, I think our fellow currently right now, she's just remote, but like, I know one of the reasons why she was very interested in this placement and just the fellowship in general was to get experience doing government work. I know when Patty and I have looked at fellows, we've always looked for people that were really service oriented, had good people skills, that sort of thing, because I think that translates well, whatever the placement is. Okay, that's all.
Thanks, Pascal. Anastasia or Alex, do you want to jump in?
I can talk for a second. Hey, I was placed at New York City Emergency Management, private public partnerships with Amanda and Erica, and it was a really great experience. I also came from a more nonprofit world experience, so it was really interesting to be in a new environment. We worked with nonprofits. We worked with a lot of private organizations. That was new to me. And now I'm applying for a fellowship with housing, HDC, and I feel like one of the things they're looking for are the things that we were working on a lot with John D's Fellowship. So that's like collecting data and making sure things are accurate, sending out emails, a lot of those basic skills. And then also I was there for 2019, 2020. So I did have the experience responding to an emergency, and it was the things that go on behind the scenes are amazing. And the way people are able to communicate and work together was really, really great. I really liked my time at NISM, and it's proving to benefit me in my future endeavors.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex.
Okay, I guess I'm last. Hi, everyone. I'm Anastasia. I was fellowship with Alex at NISM, but I was with the Intergovernmental Affairs unit. I think they're called Government Relations now. That was working a lot with like tracking legislation, having communication with elected officials, and the emergency management staff have a dual role. They have their normal day-to-day, here's when an emergency is not happening, or a big emergency is not happening. And then they have their emergency management hat where they go out and do all the work during an activation. And I ended up taking part in 4, I think, at least. 1 in person, and then there was COVID and multiple storms. So I got to see what happens, with elected official requests, what they need, what they ask for, how the unit and agency respond. And I would like to say that the day-to-day for me was normal up until like February. I was basically just tracking legislation, all the requests that came in, a lot of spreadsheet work, data organization. And then after that, it was everything COVID centric. So I had a bit of both worlds, which is in the middle of the pandemic, my role changed every day. So whatever the unit really need help with, I would take on, and then, come back to something that was somewhat routine, and then back on another emergency assignment. But with that said, I learned so much. There were things that I, did not know how the city worked, even though I lived here my whole life. I went to a lot of community board meetings, heard about each neighborhood and, what they see as a strategic need or an emergency versus what we hear as an emergency. Like, we obviously know that COVID-19 is an emergency event, but there are millions of other things, and they'll testify that they never stop getting emails. So they hear about everything, and it was definitely an experience to see that. And I had one more thing that I was a bit, one thing that I knew as a fellow was this was going to be a serious undertaking, and I was going to learn a lot. I did not realize how many acronyms there are, and a lot of them overlap. So I definitely think that if you were, to take on the fellowship, you would learn a lot of words you've never heard before, or a combination of acronyms, which I thought was cool. And if any of you are working, a student, and planning to do the fellowship, that's what I did. I had a part-time job. I was a fellow, and I did school part-time, and it was definitely an interesting time management game, but everything kind of flowed together because I'm doing the master's in international affairs. And after the fellowship was done, I took a class in international emergency management, and I was able to translate what I learned in person to theory and back. So I thought that was pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. Okay, amazing. So I see that there are a bunch of questions in the chat, so I just want to get to those. Okay, so Fatima had a good question, which is, does the fellowship guarantee a position afterwards, like for instance, the PMF does?
It does not. So fellows are placed at one of various agencies, and many of our fellows, over 50%, have moved on to public service and have moved on to positions, whether it's with their agency or another city agency, but we do not guarantee a full-time position thereafter.
Gotcha. Okay. And then actually a second question from Fatima. So since this is for folks who are going to be students through spring 2022, are there any opportunities for alumni to get involved, or is this really a student program?
This is really a student program. We're pretty flexible in terms of our applicants and their current situation, but the only requirement that we do have is that someone is in graduate school, in a graduate program through that particular cycle that they're applying for. So from September 2021 through May 2022, they have to be in graduate school.
Okay, gotcha. And we did touch on this, but question from Carla. Are the placements remote or in person mostly, or is it kind of a mix?
So in light of COVID, it is a mix depending on where you're placed. I would say pre-COVID, it was an in-person fellowship. In light of the pandemic and just various concerns, a lot of fellows are working remotely or coming in a day or two a week. And so that is something that you can talk through with a supervisor during the interview process. Given that we are moving towards vaccines for everyone, I cannot speak to what the future looks like, if it's definitely going to be in person, if it's going to be a mix or solely remote. So I can't make those guarantees, but right now I can tell you that it is a mix depending on your placement, where some folks are going in person and working remotely at other locations. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. And can you remind us, like, what are the minimum hours folks have to work, and what's like the most they could work if they want to?
Sure. So the minimum is 15 hours, about 2 days a week, right? So about 7.5 hours a day. So minimum 2 days a week. The maximum is really up to you, right? So in addition to overseeing the fellowship, I am also an alum of the program, and I was in graduate school full-time, working full-time, and also a fellow full-time. So I really was very flexible with my schedule and sort of moved a lot around, but I was coming in about 3 days a week and moved to part-time at my then full-time job. And so was coming in about 5 days a week and then working on the weekends. So it really is up to you. But with that said, I can say that a lot of our fellows who work more hours are overseeing a lot more projects, make a smoother transition into full-time, whether that is with their agency or another agency. So just keep that in the back of your minds as well. By no means am I saying, oh, if you work more hours, you will get a full-time job, but that's what we have seen in the past.
Okay, great. And is the program open to international students?
It is open to international students. We have had alums and current fellows that are international students, with the understanding that we cannot support a visa for folks. So if you are at your university and you've gone through that visa process with your university or whomever is sponsoring you, that's great. Please feel free to apply. But we, as the John D. Solomon Fellowship for Public Service, cannot sponsor students at this time.
Okay, great. And then, so by the way, folks, if we want to unmute yourself to ask a question, you can raise your hand and we can unmute you, or you can put more questions in the chat. Either way works. We are a small enough group that we can unmute folks. I also wanted to, oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I got a private question.
Okay.
And this particular person was asking, of course, now I can't find it. And she asked if the hours are flexible, can this be part of an internship? And we have had that in the past where fellows, current fellows, are also required to do an internship for their degree program, whatever it may be. And so we have coordinated with the fellow and their university to sign off saying, you know, they've worked this many hours, these are their projects, tasks, etc. So that is something that we have done in the past. Of course, it depends on your degree, what you're studying, if what you are doing within the fellowship meets that criteria. But if it does, we're more than happy to work with you and your university to get that done.
Okay, great. So since we have had such a great number of fellows come from Marks, I wonder if there's anything that you can tell us about how to stand out in the application process. I believe there are free classes, like free FEMA classes online that some of our students have done. Do you think it's helpful to kind of brush up on emergency management terms and things like that, and write about that specifically in your application?
It's always helpful for folks to have some sort of foundation, right? So if you go the extra mile and take a FEMA 100, 200, 700, 800, which by the way, just in terms of emergency management, are like the foundation courses. So if you do want to make emergency management your career, your profession, just go take those because they're going to be required at any position that you go for. But at the same time, if folks go that extra mile, take some of those courses, or just familiarize themselves with the language, with the acronyms that Stacy mentioned and many folks have mentioned earlier, just showing that you have some sort of foundation or understanding of emergency management is always helpful. And just makes it a little bit easier as a supervisor to talk through various points, concerns, etc. just makes the day-to-day a little bit easier for the supervisor as well as for you. At the same time, in terms of really standing out in the crowd, we go through the applications with a fine-tooth comb, and we really do read your paragraphs, your interest in emergency management, in in public service. Like, we really do read through that. So trying to make that as convincing as possible is helpful. And not adding fluff just for the sake of adding fluff, but talking about your experiences, talking about your interests, is always, always helpful. Erica, I don't know if you have anything that you'd like to add to that.
I would also add that we love to see how you've been volunteering or spending your time when you're not at work or learning, or if you have a passion or a hobby or something like that, or you serve your community in some way, shape, or form that informs your own motivations for public service. We're really interested in people who are passionate, who want to learn. You don't need to know it all in order to be selected, but showing that curiosity and that willingness to learn is also something that I personally look for in applicants.
Great, and thank you for putting those links in the chat, Erica. Those are really helpful. So anyone who's thinking about applying should definitely check out those links and save them, and we can also send them as part of the follow-up. I noticed Elizabeth, one of our other Solomon and Mark's folks, made it to our chat. So Elizabeth, we did kind of go around with the Solomon former and current fellows and ask them a little bit about what they did, like actually on a day-to-day basis. I'm wondering if you want to chime in and tell us a little bit about your experience.
Sure. Hey, everybody. Sorry I'm late. I was helping with one of the things, an annual event that the Solomon Fellow works with Red Cross on, which is Share the Red, a multi-day sort of like training and social events that they do. So we just wrapped up a preparedness event at 1:30. So yes, I'm a public administration student at Baruch, and I am placed with the Red Cross, and I work primarily with their disaster action team. So Wiki, who is my mentor in my fellowship, she manages the New York City disaster action team. So those are the people who assist with primarily like apartment fires. So like there are the large scale disaster relief operations like the wildfires, hurricanes, like large events like that. But then there are also like the steady state things that happen, like especially in New York City. So primarily apartment fires. So they're the team that immediately reaches out to the people affected by those and gets them set up for recovery. So providing immediate assistance to those people. The biggest project that I have worked on, and I'm working on it a little bit less now, but the first half of my fellowship was helping them to get set up with like a sort of like a new communication strategy. So it was like very much affected by and shaped by the pandemic. So this is a team where people are typically going out onto the scene. And just based on national guidance from Red Cross, they are now doing that primarily virtually. So whereas in the past, these volunteers would hear from the emergency communication center that there is an apartment fire, they would go out to the scene and meet the affected families there in person, speak to them, get them set up with the assistance they need. So now those people call into a number and get that information over the phone and then get them set up with the assistance that they need. So I helped get them set up. I don't know if anybody is familiar with Microsoft Teams, if you've had to use that in your workplace. So that's the system that they use. So we set up basically like a 24-hour like chat room and like video conference kind of like this, so that the people on shift could communicate with each other, but then also they can use it for training. So that's been like my major project that I've kind of helped them with. It's very much like a group project, but getting that kind of set up and getting everybody trained on it, getting people trained to train new people on it. So that's been the big thing that I worked on sort of like the first half of my fellowship. Now I'm kind of moving on to other sorts of projects. So right now I'm also assisting with these virtual events that they're doing to engage people. We have a snack party and recipe swap this evening. So that's what I'm doing tonight at 6:30.
Awesome. Thank you, Elizabeth. So Elizabeth mentioned communications, and I also just wanted to ask all the Solomon folks about what kind of skills are you looking for? So if somebody doesn't have a lot of experience with government or emergency management, I know that we have folks from all different backgrounds, which could be like finance or communications, data analysis, program management, policy analysis. Is there room for folks from all different backgrounds with all different skill sets, or are there skills that you're looking for over others?
Sure. So I think it really depends on the placement. So I think that there's a rainbow of skill sets out there. And because there's so many placements, 10 to be specific, not like hundreds, but because there are 10 placements and 10 very different needs for each unit or agency, all skill sets are more than welcome. Right. So if you're really interested in communications, as Pascal was talking about earlier, FD&Y, like that's the meat and potatoes of what that placement is about, with an emergency management spin. But of course, communications is at the forefront of what the fellow would be working on or supporting. Whereas, say with DEP, they're doing a lot of actually emergency management. That's specifically the unit that the fellow is working in. But there's a lot of going out to various facilities and taking a look at whatever the issue at hand may be. So if someone who's really interested in boots on the ground, if you will, then that's the placement for you, or something that you might be more interested in. So it really depends on your skill set and the needs of that specific agency and the work that the fellowship would be doing. So that's where the webinar, I think, is most helpful, because you get a better understanding of the agency, the personalities of the supervisors, and the projects that you would be working on. So I highly recommend, if you do make it to that particular point, it is also required, but I highly recommend that you attend so that you can also ask the supervisors questions that you may have. But with that said, there are a range of skills that we look for given the various placements. But at the end of the day, I would say flexibility is at the utmost importance. And that's not just regarding the hours that you have to work every week, but the change in priorities, right? And that's even myself and Erica, we work at emergency management day to day. COVID aside, there are things that pop up last minute where you have to be flexible and change your priorities to meet that need. And so with the fellows, we also expect that as well, right? If things are happening because there is a blizzard, or there's a global pandemic, or there's a manhole fire, right? You still need to make sure that you are flexible to meet those needs. And quick thinking, I think, is really helpful. And last thing, of course, I will definitely turn it over to Erica. Folks who are not necessarily afraid to speak their mind, right? So Erica and I are looking at a document day in and day out. We've been revising it for a week or a month. Having a fresh perspective is really, really helpful. And so making sure that you feel comfortable enough, of course, to say, hey, there's a misspelling in the very first paragraph, please point that out. But also, hey, maybe if we tweak it this way, it might be easier for partners or whomever the audience might be to digest it. So we always welcome fellows and applicants to show that they are comfortable speaking their mind and sharing their thoughts. But Erica, or any alums or current fellows, any other thoughts?
I'm happy to emphasize that flexibility that Amanda mentioned. I also think that your ability to transfer your areas of expertise into suggesting innovative ways to solve problems in your own placement is something that supervisors and us as the administrators of the fellowship are really on the lookout for. We want to add talent to the public service sector. We also want to develop you as a public servant. So I think bringing the two together, whatever expertise you have from your background, maybe you're in your second career, maybe you're just starting out your career and you don't have any expertise, but you have a willingness to learn, be forthcoming about that, and you'll find a place.
Awesome. Thank you, Erica. And Amanda, just because you mentioned, obviously the pandemic is really serious. There are lots of serious issues going on in New York City. How intense does the fellowship get? Like, I'm imagining we're not pulling people out of like fires and things like that. Like we have a semblance of safety that we know that we're going to be okay if we're fellows, right?
No, absolutely. Sorry. Let me clearly explain that you are not a firefighter, you are not a police officer, you're not a first responder, you're not running into a burning building, you're not arresting anyone, you're not doing any of that. So it's office work, right? And emergency management, quite honestly, is coordination, is planning. And so it may not sound as exciting, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of standing and talking to other folks. It's a lot of networking. So emergency managers are professional coordinators and networkers. That's what we are. COVID aside, we normally have our interviews in the EOC, which is the Emergency Operations Center. And so you see that this is where various city agencies come together and coordinate during an emergency. So for example, with COVID, before everyone started moving remotely and social distancing and doing a lot of the things that now have become second nature, all of these city, federal, and state entities were in the Emergency Operations Center, sitting next to each other, trying to figure out, how do we get through this? How do we spin up a hospital in the Javits Center? How do we coordinate with various entities to either find a vaccine or to deliver hot meals to folks who are homebound, or senior citizens who cannot leave their homes, et cetera. And so with that, you see a lot of that. And that's what the fellows are sort of expected to support. I know that Alex, who was our fellow last year, she had different priorities. We all had different priorities before COVID. But because of the pandemic, she was in the EOC with us, sort of working through what this means for the private sector, which is sort of what we focus on. So for businesses, what are the guidelines? How do they get open as quickly as possible? Or when we started shutting things down, who's considered essential? Where is that listed? How do we prove that we're essential, et cetera? Working as that first line of communication for the agency with a bunch of businesses. So by no means are you in harm's way, but you are expected to sit at a desk, whether that's at home or in an office, and answer those questions, just be available. But we do take safety very seriously, and by no means should you be in harm's way. And if you do feel that, please feel free to reach out to myself or Erica.
Okay, great. So since we do have so many current and former Solomon Fellows, I guess I wanted to ask folks, like, what do you find has been like the best thing about your Solomon Fellowship experience? Was it the connections you made? Was it something that you learned? Was it a network that you gained? Was it the experience that now you can put on your resume? Just leave it open. Anyone who wants to chime in.
I think for me, it was, it's a mix of everything that I've learned. I think I learned more about what I'm capable of in this fellowship because, like Amanda said, you have to be very flexible, but with that also means knowing your limits and communicating them effectively to your supervisor and just saying, like, this event is like super important. Can you come to this? Okay, yes. But also saying, I have a midterm in X amount of days. Can I change my schedule? Can I and my supervisors, I was lucky, they were very willing to make sure that my schoolwork stayed on track. And even throughout the pandemic, they would ask, like, how are you doing? Are you okay? Everyone checks in on you. But also I'm still in contact with my former supervisors. We have a group chat, we hang out virtually. And I think that was a great thing for me because now they're mentors as well. So I can reach out to them and I know that if I say, hey, I'm applying for this position, do you have any advice? Like, how should I approach it? They turn around and they'll cheer me on and give me the biggest pep talk that I could ever have, but also, help me figure out how I want to approach this and like papers and things, because I took an emergency management course. So I think building your network from this fellowship and the skills you learn and learning about yourself, I think it's a mix of all three things.
Awesome. Thanks, Anastasia. Does anyone else want to chime in?
Okay. So for me, I felt like it was not only a really strong professional experience that, you know, I got real tangible things I could put on my resume. And I think we've always like tried to do that for our fellows, Patty and I. But I also really appreciated the mentorship experience with her. She's a really strong mentor for me, a really strong advocate for me at the agency, but also just as a fellow, she was always cheering me on, saying kudos for whatever I did well. And, you know, it was, if I hadn't stayed on longer, I know that it was a great experience to have, or a great person to have in my corner for other professional experiences. And I think that's been true of other fellows. The fellow before me is still in contact with some of the folks at the agency. So like for me, like the mentorship aspect of this was really strong and really nice. And even with the other fellows in my fellowship year, we're still on a WhatsApp chat now. So I think it's nice when anyone has a job or something, they'll like send it over. Everyone's a team player. I think it's a nice community to be a part of.
I feel the same way. I also feel like I felt really valued at my organization. And also just a really good lesson is that participating in a government agency, yeah, the coordination is a huge key, which is a really amazing skill to have. But also, I think something that Amanda had to remind me of is something that happens in school that's different in a public agency is that you can make mistakes and learn from them. And that's okay. And, you know, in school, it's like if you make a mistake, that can be your grade. Whereas in an agency, it's like you make a mistake and then you get to like learn from it and have conversations about that too. So making mistakes is an okay thing. The mentorships are really incredible. And the relationships are really great too. And you get to talk to other fellows and see what they're doing too. So I'm still close friends with Miguel, who is a fellow at the same time I was, and he got some really interesting hands-on experience with a mainline break. So he was actually able to go on site, and he was really excited about that, and he learned a little bit more about what his interests are. And yeah, all the fellows are really generally like wonderful, cool, interesting people. Pascal, Elizabeth, Stacy.
I'll share a little bit about one thing that I think it's core to what the fellowship experience is, but has been really outstanding for me to witness is, you know, I'm just essentially invited to leadership meetings and I can just be a fly on the wall and listen, and it's fabulous. I was telling a friend recently that like they had a Thunderbolt exercise during a leadership meeting a couple weeks ago, maybe about a month ago. And so that's like an unplanned exercise. So I just got to watch them like problem solve this, like kind of this scenario of like, okay, there's this emergency and like so-and-so doesn't have power. So like, you know, he turned off his like video and was muted. It was just like, all right, he's not available. So like who needs to step up into his role and like, let's play this out. So, you know, I just got to like be there, you know, I just got to witness that happen and watch them work through it and figure out. And just like Alex, it kind of goes to what Alex was saying too, of just like, they got to practice it in that moment with no advance notice and see, you know, okay, what kind of questions actually do we need to ask? Like, what is it that, you know, we're reacting to in this moment? And how would we do that differently? So even within the leadership, like they got this experience to like practice it, see what kind of mistakes they may have made, sort of like refocus. And, you know, I just got to like listen, and I was like learned so much from just watching them do that and being there, you know, it's like a really great opportunity to just like be in the room and listen and be privy to these kind of exercises and practices and conversations and see what their leadership looks like.
Great, thank you, Liz. Any other fellows want to add anything?
Yeah, I could speak a little to, I probably sound like a broken record after everybody else, but same thing, you're getting, you're really behind the scenes. So you're seeing things happen in real time, things that just, come up when you live in New York City. I also totally agree about just like the mentorship I've been getting from day one. Everybody in the office, really interested in knowing me and knowing what I'm interested in figuring out how we can, tailor projects I'm working on to my interests. I never feel like I'm asking a dumb question, even if it is, me the 10th time being like, oh, what's the acronym for blah, blah, blah. I really feel like I'm having such a valuable networking opportunity. And, when pandemic hit, I was fully working from home. I'm so happy that I have this opportunity where, they let me kind of choose if I wanted to come in. And I really did. It's been really nice to, kind of change up my routine and be back out in the world. So yeah, I can't say enough, just the people you meet. And if you are interested in, a different agency than the one you're placed in, I've found my mentor here, he can get pretty much anybody on the phone. Likewise, this semester, I'm actually in my capstone class. So it's been really helpful being able to bounce ideas off of people in the office and, them with all their knowledge and perspectives being like, hey, you should really think about interviewing, X, Y, and Z, and I can put you in touch with them. It's been hugely helpful and so appreciated. It's, great people all around.
Awesome. Thank you, Gina. Okay, a couple other questions in the chat. So if folks get into the fellowship and complete the fellowship, is there a certificate or any kind of ceremony that you have at the end for all the fellows who've completed?
Yes. So normally, again, guys, COVID aside, right? In the normal world, we have a graduation where our commissioner gives a certificate to each fellow, to congratulate folks and to say, yes, you completed this particular program. Also, of course, if you're looking for a full-time position or need a recommendation thereafter, please feel free to reach out to myself or Erica. Happy to coordinate that, whether that's writing that on behalf of the fellowship or coordinating with your previous supervisor to ensure that they're able to provide that for you. But yes, normally there is a graduation. Last year, due to the pandemic, it was a virtual celebration via YouTube. So everyone got to watch and fellows provide or conduct a small presentation to talk about the projects that they were responsible for. And it's nice to, at the end of all of your hard work, talk about here's what I've done, here's what I have completed, here are the skills that I've learned. I mean, everyone sort of celebrates, not sort of, everyone is celebrating you. So kudos to the fellows. Yes.
Awesome. And I know I've also seen at least that you used to have a blog. I think maybe now it changed over to LinkedIn, but I know that there are interviews with other fellows and kind of like chances to see like photos of fellows in action doing different things like at different meetings or networking events. I'm wondering if you have a link that we can put in the chat.
Sure, we'll find that. Thank you, Erica. So Erica is going to share the link to the fellowship LinkedIn account. So you can definitely take a look at that. And each fellow is responsible for a blog post, if you will. So you're assigned a month and you write about your program, your placement. So what you're responsible for, the projects you're working on, or something really cool that happened that month, right? So fellows provide photos where applicable, and just write about what their experience has been in the program. Some fellows, especially with the pandemic, talk about what it's like to be working remotely, talk about what it's like to be responsible for XYZ in the midst of trying to respond to an emergency or what have you. So it's a really great opportunity just for folks to be able to share their experience. And of course, post that on LinkedIn, tag the fellow, just to also drive interest to your personal professional account, right? And ensure that people are taking a look at your page and what you're doing. So.
Right. That's really lovely that people get the opportunity to write about what they're doing so others can see it, and it's also a little spotlight for them, which is really nice. Okay, so any other burning questions? I know we're almost at 2 o'clock and I want to be respectful of folks' time. Is there, I guess I think that Erica might have put this in at the beginning, the email address. If folks have follow-up questions that they want to ask, is that email the best one to use? And could we potentially put it in the chat one more time?
Yes. The best way to contact us is jdsfellowship@oem.nyc.gov. Send us an email. We're more than happy to respond, answer any other questions that you may have, or talk through a personal situation that may be going on. I think one thing that I did want to add is, in addition to the skills and all the stuff that you can add to your resume, there is also some fun stuff that we do, or try to make sure that you're networking, right? So whether it's, again, pre-COVID, a personal tour of the Met and a conversation with their business continuity folks, or in our virtual world now, a conversation with Craig Fugate. For those who do not know, he was the former FEMA administrator. So just ensuring that fellows are exposed to all assets, or all facets, excuse me, of emergency management, as well as having that opportunity to network, so that post-fellowship you have a job or another internship, or just able again to have those conversations and also have a little bit of fun. So we try to make sure that we have events at least once a month to keep folks engaged.
Awesome. I mean, I think this sounds like an amazing opportunity. And I will also say that for all our students, Suzanne and I are also available to help you with the application, or consult with you, or things like that. And so, also, be thoughtful if you send any questions to the JDS Fellowship email. If they're really like a career kind of question, like, please come to Suzanne and myself, and we'll be happy to help you. But thank you so much, Amanda, Alex, Anastasia, Elizabeth, Erica, Gina, Pascal, I think had to drop off. But this was amazing. Please join me in thanking all of our, everyone from NISM and all of our fellows, current and past. This was a great session, and we really appreciate you being here with us today.
Thanks so much for having us. This has been wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thanks all. Wishing everybody, yay! Wishing everybody a great day, and get working on your application soon. Okay, thanks. Bye, everybody.